All right, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce you to Ms. Krista Romero, who is actually a Master Sergeant retired. She retired after 16 and a half years of service in the U.S. Army National Guard. She currently serves as Senior Vice President of Gen Vets Incorporated, a national veteran service organization dedicated to supporting today's greatest generations of veterans and their families. Crystal is a passionate activist for veterans' causes, playing a significant role in passing legislation related to military sexual assault and veterans' mental health, as well as advocating for veterans deported for nonviolent crimes. And besides that, you're a fantastic person, and I really appreciated getting to know you. And I know several people here today feel the same way, just from interactions on LinkedIn and phone calls that you didn't have to make. So thank you very much for coming today. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for that warm welcome. It's such an honor to be here to speak to you all today because I am a living testament to the work that you do. And that's really what my presentation is about today. It's about my journey, really. I'm like, and I have to read. I'm the opposite of you. So with that, I'll get started. But my presentation is called Always Forward. It's actually my life mantra, and it's about understanding the development of my negative self-beliefs and how that feeds moral injury. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, I'm here today not just as a veteran, but as a storyteller. Each one of us carries within us a narrative, a tale woven from our fabric of experiences, our triumphs, and our struggles. And it's through the telling of our stories that we find healing, and that we confront the demons of our past and emerge stronger, more resilient. I want to take you on a journey today, a journey through the intricacies of moral injury and the power of storytelling in its healing process. Moral injury is indeed like a battle within oneself. It's a wound to the soul, a profound sense of betrayal, a violation of values that can leave us grappling with intense feelings of guilt, shame, and inner turmoil. But moral injury can look different from person to person. Now we delve into a topic that has been both intricate and pervasive in my life: the moral injuries and the development of my negative self-beliefs. These beliefs, often deeply ingrained, have significantly impacted my thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Now we will unravel the journey of how I developed these detrimental convictions. My story begins with the unconventional circumstances of my birth. I came into this world without a father. My mother was just 15 years old. That was my reality. But fate intervened when my mother found guidance and support in her high school principal, Jose G. Lucero, a brilliant 60-year-old loving old man and veteran. He had survived the unimaginable as a World War II prisoner of war, baton death march survivor. Among the many tortures he endured, he lost the ability to have children, yet he always referred to me as his daughter. The honor in that is profound, as he could have chosen anybody, even a son. I'd like to share with you a portion of a letter that he wrote to his colleagues at student body in 1979, the year before I was born. It is with gratitude that I acknowledge your persistence and pursuance to expand your knowledge. It is my belief that regardless of your economic and social status, that you have certain unexplored potentials of which you are unaware. One of these are talents and capabilities, and you alone can probe your mind. You possess a God-given mind and body. It is up to you to nurture and develop both to their fullest extent. Teachers cannot probe your mind. However, they may guide you if you are receptive. Example, the Rangers were receptive, and so they succeeded. And this little cross-eyed baby right here is me.
Yeah.
I still did it. When I was 8 years old, he told me that I was born to be a soldier because of my birthday, March 4th. He would say, "You were born on this day because soldiers always march forward." This sparked my desire to serve and became my life mantra, always forward. He and his
March 4th.
He and his wife Stella extended their arms and hearts, embracing me as their own, as they baptized me and became my godparents, promising to help raise me. Growing up, I was enveloped in a cocoon of love and care. This is why I have never considered myself a fatherless child. You know the saying, it takes a village. Well, I was raised by a village. And yet, among the warmth of this makeshift family, there existed a shadow of secrecy and rejection. One core memory, and we can thank EWR for this, one core memory from my childhood remains etched in my mind. I remember my mother taking me to see my grandmother, my father's mother. She was a beautiful woman, petite, kind, and always very nice to me. But we never went inside her house. Instead, we would meet her at the back door. Our conversations always very brief. Little did I know that I was being kept a secret, shielded from a truth that would shape the contours of my self-perception. The muted nuances of these encounters, the unspoken rejection, became the building blocks of my negative self-belief. I'm defective, I'm unlovable. This narrative underscores a crucial truth. Moral injury can stem from our earliest experiences, as I learned firsthand. Even though I was raised by a village and had two loving godparents, I still fell victim to an online predator in 1994. I was about 14 years old. I discovered the AOL chat rooms. Anybody else? Was anybody else in the AOL chat rooms? I found an AOL chat room about music and was soon befriended by a 16-year-old boy. And after a few weeks of chatting, he became my best friend. And of course, he was very charming and said everything that a teenage girl wants to hear, especially one that's not, that's kind of being neglected at home. And when I was fighting with my mother and stepfather is kind of like when he would take the opportunity to groom me. And he somehow convinced me to steal money so that I could buy a bus ticket and run away. My mother was married at the time to my stepfather, whose sister is a very successful lawyer and was having a really fancy party at her house. So I took this as the opportunity to, okay, this is where I'm going to get the money. So at this party, I walked around, and when nobody was looking, I went into all the ladies' purses and stole money from their purses. I was able to scrounge up $176, where I bought a Greyhound bus ticket and days later ran away. Excuse me. Except when I got to Colorado, it was not a 16-year-old boy. It was a 40-something-year-old man. And I knew instantly that I was in danger, but I didn't fight him on anything because I genuinely thought that he was going to kill me. I was held in a basement and violated in ways that no 14-year-old child should be violated. But however, I was a very clever kid, so I was able to get out of that situation. I called my mother and my stepfather, who lived in Las Vegas, New Mexico, which is about 4 hours from Colorado Springs. And they came out and they picked me up. But the entire way home, I was made to feel that all of that was my fault and that I had asked for that. Only 1% to 2% of child trafficking victims are recovered. As a result of this and having no trauma-informed care, I became very defiant and self-destructive. And I was, again, made to feel that all of that was my fault. My defiance and self-destructive behaviors ultimately led me into the foster care system at age 15. Although my trauma up until this point was really horrible, I can honestly tell you that it gave me something that I would consider to be a blessing: hypervigilance. After a couple of months of being in the foster home, I didn't feel comfortable around my foster father. I didn't like the way he looked at me. I didn't like the way he looked at the other girls in the home. And I went to my social worker and told her that he made me feel uncomfortable and I felt unsafe. She assured me that I had nothing to worry about and that she was going to address the situation. A few weeks later, I came home early from school and walked in on my foster father molesting my 8-year-old foster sister. I immediately ran to the kitchen and there was a fork on the table. I grabbed it and I just went and I tapped it and I stabbed him in the shoulder. And I was the one who got in trouble in that situation. I got thrown out of foster care and was made to feel that I was the one in the wrong and that I was the problem in that situation. Never mind this 60-something-year-old man on top of this little girl. Over 500,000 kids are in foster care today, and foster care is often where sex trafficking begins. Getting kicked out of foster care, I got put into group homes in Albuquerque, New Mexico, a company called Cogares, where it's co-ed homes. There's like 5 to 10 of us teenagers in one home. And, you know, we all come from broken homes. There's no trauma-informed care in there. You're just a bunch of defiant, you know, disgruntled children thrown into a home and, hey, good luck. So I did not feel safe there either. The resident assistants that were hired to watch us were watching us, but watching us when we were taking showers. I would wake up and there would be one standing over me, touching himself. Just, it was horrible. I hated being there. I didn't want to be there. So I ran away a lot. And being 15 and nowhere to go, I got involved with gangs. And I was safer on the streets with those gang members than I was in that group home where, you know, these resident assistants were hired to watch us. But all this being said, at 15, I was boosting cars and stealing and just trying to survive. So if like anybody gets left out of your car today. But I knew all of this is not what I wanted for my life. I knew that. So at 17, I enlisted in the military, determined to honor the legacy of service instilled in me by my godfather. And also, this whole presentation is really just the evolution of my eyebrows. We have both come a really long way. After taking my basic training in advanced individual school, I came to see my godfather. I was dressed in my uniform, you know, the BDU days where you're like starched to death. Yes. And I was I couldn't wait for him to see me. And the minute he saw me, his eyes filled with tears, and he said, "See, you were born to be a soldier." Aww. And I told him how it was important for me to make something of myself, to be part of something bigger than me. He paused and he said, "War is not something to be taken lightly." And it was at that point that I opened up to him and told him about the sexual assault that I had experienced when I was a teenager, and that I felt that I had already experienced my own war. And that he, in response, shared his story about the torture he endured as a prisoner of war. He told me how the Japanese soldiers emasculated him as punishment for taking the firing pins out of their rifles. What struck me the most, though, was when he told me, he said, "There will be people in this world that will try to take things from you, but you must never forget that no one can take away who you are." And for a time, I found purpose and fulfillment in my service. I served in various capacities. I have 4 military occupational specialties. I started in logistics. I did that for a couple of years because when I did my ASVAB, I had a 10th grade education. So I didn't score very high. So I went in logistics, worked in the arms room for a while. And then I found out that the Army had photographers. And at the time, I was 19, I was going to college for graphic design and photography. And so I'm like, holy crap. I would say, holy shit. The Army has photography. I was so excited. So I talked to my commander and I said, "Hey, how do I do that?" And so she was like, "We'll just do a transfer and you can request to change your MLS." So I did. So I became a photojournalist for a couple of years. And I can tell you right now that my absolute favorite thing to do was photographing airborne soldiers. Ooh. Because, yes, that's right. That's right. Because to witness so much bravery and fear in the same moment, it's just I can't even explain it. It's such a blessing. And I remember right before they would jump, I would give them the biggest smile. Because I mean, I might be the last person they see. Hey guys, I hope you make it.
Now I'm gonna grab this dad.
While on assignment, as a photojournalist, as a result of 9/11, the United States, they started and founded these WMD units, weapons of mass destruction civil support team. Every state has one. It's a full-time National Guard unit composed of 22 members, both Air and Army National Guard, full-time personnel. And the sole purpose of this is to provide homeland security support to our federal entities. So while on assignment, I was just amazed with the work that they do. And the commander, I was in E4 at the time. He was, hey, Romero, do you want to join our team? I'm like, are you kidding me? Yes. So I transferred over to chemical, biological, radiological, explosives, and nuclear, and became a weapons of mass destruction operations person. So I'm sure you can see this on the hazmat suits. I'm sure you can tell which one is me.
Me too. It's okay.
I know there was always a complaint because they had to like special order my suits. So they were like, you're always costing us money. And I'm like, but I got to work with NASA in 2002 when Space Shuttle Columbia went down. My unit, because we're part of that FEMA region, we went and helped with the recovery efforts. And I'll tell you right now, there's just so much meaning in that because of all the astronauts on the shuttle, only one of them wasn't a veteran. So it was just such an honor to also help communities. I helped with several humanitarian relief efforts, Hurricanes Katrina, Ike, and to witness such devastation to a community, but also be there to help. There's just so much meaning in that. And it's just meaningful work. I had a very successful and meaningful career until I didn't. In 2009, I was appointed as a substance abuse program coordinator, which meant I oversaw the drug testing program for the Army and Air National Guard. And as an additional duty, I was assigned as the victim advocate for the Sexual Harassment Assault Response Program, also known as SHARP. I was completely unaware of how bad sexual violence was in our military because that had not been my experience. And it is with so much gratitude that I thank the men that I worked with, because never at any time during my career did I ever feel unsafe. Did I ever feel creeped out, or, you know, I never felt like I was in danger. If anything, it was just devastating to my dating life because everywhere I went, I was usually the only female. So it was like having 50 dads. Little did I know that my duties as the substance abuse coordinator and sexual assault victim advocate, that these roles would eventually end my career. In 2011, I encountered a young female soldier who had turned to methamphetamines and heroin to cope with her rape. As both her victim advocate and substance abuse coordinator, I helped her get into rehab. I asked my counterpart, the prevention treatment outreach coordinator, to keep an eye on her. And weeks later, when I followed up, she dismissed the soldier and said, she is a lost cause and I don't have time to be chasing her around. I will never forget those words because those were the words that impacted me. And this undoubtedly was, this responsibility fell within her personal purview. And she had been in this position for 5 months, and it's a position of trust, right? People are coming to you with a serious problem. And so for anyone to dismiss a soldier that has been identified as a sexual assault victim, I'm sorry, but that does not sit well with me. I went to our boss, a colonel, and I told him that service members' needs were being neglected and that I would like a reassignment for her. But he warned me of her family ties. Her father, a retired lieutenant general. Her brother was the chief of staff, therefore that's my boss's boss. And her other brother was my brigade command sergeant major. He told me, I'm not gonna bite the hand that feeds me, Sergeant Romero. I suggest you file an EO complaint. So I complied, filed an EO complaint, even though I know it's not an EO complaint. And the EO sergeant major told me, that's equal opportunity, said, this is a leadership issue. Agreed, absolutely. That's when the harassment began, because how dare me test the system? How dare me step up to them? How dare me defend myself? And I'll tell you one thing I do have, and that is the audacity to stand up for myself and others. As the situation worsened, I felt as if my career was in jeopardy, so I filed a whistleblower complaint with the Department of Defense Inspector General's office. This only led to more hostility at work. It got so bad that I was referred to mental health, where I was placed on 5 medications. And for the clinicians in the room, I'm sure that you can imagine being on Adderall, Paxil, Trazodone, Xanax, and Lorazepam would do to a person. Okay, I was extremely suicidal, and this led me to admit myself, self-refer myself into the hospital, where I was admitted for suicide ideation, anxiety, depression, and exhaustion due to work conflict. As a non-commissioned officer, our 2 basic responsibilities are the mission and the welfare of our soldiers.
Yeah.
That's it. So I was prevented from doing my duty. And I felt like a failure as a result of that. This is where the shame comes in. I felt very betrayed and very abandoned and like I had failed. To make matters worse, while I was in the hospital, I was notified that one of my colleagues had taken his own life. Days after his funeral, I found out that the reason he took his life is because he was sexually abusing his daughter. This was someone that I trusted and respected. We faced challenges together, shared responsibilities, and as we talk about in the military, we're a family. I never questioned his character. But the moment I found out about why he took his own life, everything changed, and I felt like the floor was ripped out from underneath me. How could someone that I shared the same values with, wore the same uniform, commit such an unforgivable act? Everything I knew about him became tainted. I was questioning my own judgment, wondering how I could have missed something so dark in someone that I knew. That's the essence of moral injury. It's not just about witnessing something horrific, but it's about feeling like your own values have been violated by someone you trusted. It left me with a deep sense of conflict because this wasn't just some distant colleague. This was someone that I worked very closely with for almost a decade. The man that I knew was he was nothing that I knew. And so this, on top of the harassment and everything that I was dealing at work, it just became very heavy. When I returned to duty 15 days later, my hospitalization, along with my psychiatric records, were passed around amongst senior officers, and details of my childhood trauma were now shared and used to humiliate me and to mock me, and to further just marginalize me. And this just sent me into a further depression, a spiral. I felt extremely betrayed. When I demanded support, I was relieved of my duties and reassigned to a non-position. I was taken off of active duty and placed on a National Guard status. This is what derailed my career, and it deepened my depression, leading to another hospitalization in April of 2012. I was then referred for a mental health evaluation, and I was found unfit for duty. And those words, unfit for duty, after 16 years of service, was the biggest throat punch. In February of 2014, I was medically discharged for post-traumatic stress due to hostile work environment. ending my career after 16 years of service. I was a single mother, 3 children under the age of 10. My own leaders had betrayed everything that I believed in, the work that we do, our values, and my godfather. I felt like I had failed and I couldn't live with that. So in August of 2014, I attempted suicide. The Department of Defense completed their investigation in October of 2014, 252 days after I was discharged. Their investigation took a total of 935 days. My complaint was not substantiated. I was told I could appeal with the Army Board of Corrections, but the statute of limitations is 3 years. Can anyone guess how long my FOIA took? 6 years. Delay, deny until you die. This is moral injury in its rawest form, betrayal of trust and abandonment of duty. I share my story today not just for myself, but for every service member who has ever felt the sting of betrayal from those entrusted to protect them. It's a reminder that silence will allow injustice to continue. Moral injury doesn't manifest the same way for everyone. It wears different faces, speaks in different voices. To illustrate this, I want to share a short clip from Volunteers of America.
Yay.
They are in the house, everybody. To give you a visualization of what moral injury can look like. It's every day fighting with yourself. Moral injuries have the capacity to shake the very foundation of who you are. And for some, it can be a death sentence, if not acknowledged. Leaving the military wasn't just about transitioning to civilian life. It was about confronting the deep scars of both developmental trauma and moral injury. Every day presented a new challenge as I tried to manage overwhelming emotions, primarily anger, guilt, distrust, and not just toward others, but toward myself. The physical toll was significant. I suffered from headaches, dizziness, loss of appetite. My sleep was erratic, alternating between excessive sleeping and sleepless nights. There were times when I would dissociate, said it right, feeling detached from reality, floating between my past and present. But the hardest part was the persistent and unrelentless suicidal thoughts. Those moments of darkness were worsened by my inability to admit that I was struggling. As a single mother, I felt trapped between my responsibilities and my own suffering. I didn't feel like I could show weakness, afraid that admitting my pain would leave me vulnerable in a world where I had already seen too much. My formative years were in the military. I enlisted at 17 years old. I spent 90% of that time on active duty, fully immersed in rigid, high-stakes situations. When I left, I wasn't just transitioning jobs, and Anne talked about this in her presentation, but I was entering into a civilian world where I had never even been. And it was terrifying. I didn't have any transition assistance. It was just, like you said, hey, good luck. If you need anything, don't call us. So I went out and I earned 2 degrees, a master's in acting and a doctorate in denial. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I'm a soldier, right? You know what a soldier do? You march forward. So I put on a mask and I went out into the world to rebuild myself again. And that's exactly what I did. I discovered Poshmark in its infant phase in July of 2012, the same year that I was taken off of active duty. Does anybody here know what Poshmark is?
Yeah.
I don't.
Oh,
Poshmark is an online marketplace where people can buy and sell new and secondhand clothing, accessories, and home goods. It's like a digital thrift store where individuals can list from their personal home closets to make an online virtual closet, making it easy. It's great for military spouses, by the way, because we move around so much, right? And our spouses never really get an opportunity to plant any roots. Well, your closet goes wherever you go. When I started my closet in 2012, there was only a few hundred users on Poshmark. Today, there's over 80 million registered users worldwide. In January of this year, it was acquired by Neighbor, a Korean marketplace, for $1.3 billion. In 2018, Poshmark gave me an opportunity to speak at the annual conference in Dallas, Texas. This was my first time that I spoke publicly in front of hundreds of people, and I chose to talk about mental health and what it meant to be a suicide attempt survivor. I talked about the shame that I carried for so long because I couldn't forgive myself for almost abandoning my 3 daughters. That was very hard to overcome. Every single member of the Poshmark community that I came encounter with, they were just so supportive and so loving, and they were like a safety net, because I honestly can tell you now that if I had not found Poshmark or something to do, I would have had absolutely no purpose, at least so I thought. That was my way of thinking, and I don't know that I would have survived that. I traveled the world, became an ambassador and an influencer. I attended Fashion Week in London. I did all this cool stuff. I discovered my femininity that I had suppressed while in service. I never wore makeup or anything in service because I remember one time I showed up with chapstick to my godfather's house. This is right before he passed. I passed when I was 22. And he's like, "What's that shit on your face?" He's like, "There's no Maybelline in war. We train how we fight." He's absolutely right. I put my military, in fact, from the time I retired 2014 to 2020, you wouldn't even know that I served in the military. I was so ashamed of how I left that I didn't want to have the conversation, you know, like, because, "Oh, you're retired master's? Wow, that's amazing." Is it? I had moved on. And then this happened. June 25th, 2020, I'll never forget that day. I was scrolling through Instagram and I saw the face of Army soldier Vanessa Guillen on my timeline alongside the headline, "Missing Soldier at Fort Hood." It made absolutely no sense to me. The more I looked into her situation, the more infuriated I became. And I'll tell you what, everything about her case triggered me. Talk about triggers. That was it. I was triggered. The way she was ignored, the disrespect to her family, everything. None of it made sense. She worked in an arms room. I worked in an arms room. To this day, I could tell you the protocols, and I've been out for 10 years. Why? Because in the military, they train us to be competent, to be efficient, and to know your job, to be subject matter experts in everything that you do. That's why our training is repetitive, because it's important that you know what you do, because your job, no matter what it is a life or death situation. You are part of the mission. Everybody, from the cooks to the supply guy, to the infantry, to the officers, everybody. We're a machine. So when parts are not in place, the machine doesn't work. Everything about her, it just brought all my trauma to the surface. But I'm glad it did, because it introduced me to some pretty important parts of myself that I had been ignoring for years. I met my anxiety. I met my anger, my sadness, and my personal favorite, my grief. My grief. And my grief, which would show up as anger. That's how I was showing up to the world. I was flooded with emotions, rage, My depression, everything came back. I was very short-tempered, easily irritated, pushed everybody away. It worsened my depression, and it was probably the worst my depression had ever been. It was as if everything that I had pushed down for so long had just all came to the surface. But there's something that I couldn't do, and that was nothing. So I went into Master Sergeant Romero mode, the way you would put a truck into four-wheel drive. And it was go time. I dropped everything that I was doing and became an activist, or as I like to call it, pain in the activist. For veterans' rights. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, but I didn't care. Because I would look to other organizers, and when you are receptive, you will receive, you will succeed. Over the last 4 years, I have unapologetically advocated for women that have been sexually harassed in the US military. The Military Justice Improvement and Increasing Prevention Act was signed into law by President Joe Biden on December 27th of 2021 as a result of Vanessa Guillen's tragic death. That piece of legislation was significant, and it aimed at reforming how the military handles cases of sexual assault and other serious crimes by removing the prosecution decisions from the chain of command and placing them in the hands of independent military prosecutors. You can't report a problem to a problem.
That's true.
That's it. That's it. Taking care of soldiers is just something that I've always been passionate about, and I was like reminded of how much I loved doing it. In fact, let me tell you how easy it is to help a soldier. You don't even have to be in the military. And don't say, Crystal said to do this, because I'll deny it. February 17th of 2022, a soldier, female soldier, messaged me on Instagram and said she was being sexually harassed. She was in Romania. And I'm like, okay, she's in Romania. I'm not even in the military. I tweeted the Sergeant Major of the Army. And in less than 3 hours, I had commanders, I had the sexual assault response coordinator from Europe, and several sergeant majors in my inbox saying, how can we help this soldier? I had her evacuated within 3 days to Germany. That's how easy it is. And that's who we are. That's who we represent. That is what we do. People first, that's people first. It wasn't, let's have a meeting, let's discuss what's going on. No, you have a soldier who is asking for help. You just make it happen. The Brandon Act was implemented. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead of myself. Also 2022, myself, Army veteran Denise James, and Air Force veteran Leonard Gonzalez led a national campaign for the Brandon Act, where I used my story to advocate for service members who self-refer themselves into the hospital to save their own lives. The Brandon Act was implemented by the Department of Defense on May 5th of 2023. The Brandon Act, named after Navy Petty Officer 3rd Class Brandon Caserta, aims to improve access to mental health care for service members. It allows military personnel to seek mental health support confidentially and report mental health issues without fear of retaliation or losing their careers. You shouldn't choose between your life and your career. I self-referred myself into the hospital because I knew that I didn't want to kill myself. I wanted to stop what was going inside my head. There should not be punishment for that. I also advocate on behalf of veterans that have been deported for nonviolent crimes. It absolutely blows my mind when you can be a registered sex offender in the United States, but heaven forbid you are in mental health. You are struggling from mental health problems as a veteran. A lot of these nonviolent crimes are a result of untreated mental health care. Homelessness. When you're homeless, what are you doing? You're stealing because you want to feed yourself, right? So imagine I have a story, a young lady, her name's Laura Mesa, and I do have permission to say her name. because I use her name all the time. She's a combat veteran from Costa Rica. Before she went into combat, we have to go to what's called a MOB station in Germany. She was sexually assaulted right before going into war. No care, no treatment. Hey, suck it up, soldier. She deploys, she's a mortuary affairs specialist. Comes home from war, and as a result of all this trauma, she starts experiencing mental health problems, turns to drugs and alcohol to cope, gets in trouble, served 6 months in jail, gets out of jail, is deported. I'm sorry, but isn't that like double jeopardy? That's being punished twice. Being deported, that is the highest level of betrayal that our federal government can do to a service member. After meeting all of my anxiety, anger, grief, I knew that I needed to do something. I turned to the VA, and I'm not going to bash the VA because the VA has done some pretty exceptional things for me, but the wait lists were really long. So I turned to some exceptional organizations that helped me. Heroic Hearts Project is a nonprofit that was founded by Army Ranger Jesse Gould, that provides alternative treatment for veterans with PTSD. Another organization is Save a Warrior. Save a Warrior is you all on steroids. It's a 3-day retreat where you can get like a PhD in moral injury. Going through that program is what helped me to identify, and Dr. Archer, we talked about this earlier when I said what was the aha moment. The moment I registered what moral injury was, from that point on, I was able to address it. I was able to put a name on it. I was able to start doing something about it. I was able to recognize how my behaviors were affecting everybody around me. I realized how my children were being affected because they're the ones who are in my immediate space. I needed to be reminded of who I was because ultimately none of us can do this by ourselves. Instead of letting all this trauma define me, I now use it as a tool to advocate and also to educate. And my goal is to be in every university at some point. And to get the Moral Injury Service Network on the map as well. You too can help veterans remember just who they are by listening to their stories, helping them to shed light on the darkness within you. You can pave the way for healing, for growth, and for a future where moral injury is acknowledged and addressed. Every single person listening today can have the most life-changing effect on someone that you can possibly imagine. Giving someone the feeling that they aren't alone anymore is the most selfless and courageous act you can give another human being. Because in the end, it is our stories that define us. It is our stories that heal us. And it's our stories that will shape the future of our military, our society, and our world. When I reflect on my godfather's powerful words, "You were born to be a soldier," I realize that he wasn't speaking about the battlefield, but the strength and resilience within me. No matter the challenges life throws our way, may we stand firm in who we are. And remember, no one can take away who you are. I am Crystal C. Romero. I stand here today grounded in the legacy of my godfather, Jose G. Lucero. I am reminded that we are all on a journey, each step taking us closer to growth, healing, and purpose. No matter the obstacles we face, the pain we endure, the battles we fight, may we all continue to march through life with resilience and faith and courage. Let us commit as a community and as individuals to keep moving in the only direction that matters, and that is always forward.
So what's interesting to me about that story is it could be easy for somebody that didn't know to think, well, that's one person, right? But after interviewing 50 women veterans and hearing their stories, your story is far too common. Like it has
I'm not.
those elements of sexual, I mean, everything that you talked about, other women have talked about. And that's where you go, this is not like a one-off. This is not an occasion, you know, the Gian was a one-off. No, like this is far, far, far too common. And it's, the problem is it's such a tragic story. It's difficult to believe, right? And it's easy for people to just go, I don't know, and disbelieve than accept like this might be happening in much bigger numbers in our military than we imagine. And every woman veteran you see, right, there's a really high chance that she has a buried story that has some or all of those elements.
Yes.
But it's hard for, unless you're immersed in this kind of work and you've heard enough stories, it can be hard for people to really accept, like there's a lot of this that's happening out there.
Right.
So I appreciate you sharing the story, and I just want to, you know, for every one of you, there's no telling how many others, you know, yeah.
Yes, everybody has a story. Every woman service member, female service member, we sacrifice so much. A lot of our identity is suppressed. I mean, Annette, you going before me was so amazing.
We got trapped together, sister.
We
just stay happy together. Why are we not trapped? Do the political thing and then you do all the personal, that'll be awesome. Not moving goalposts.
Yes, but like to Dan's point, I am not unique. My story is not unique. Are you kidding me? There's so many out there whose stories are far worse. And that's why I do what I do. For two reasons. One, to remind people that this doesn't have to define you. This moral injury that I have it, I still struggle with it, but I don't ignore it anymore. When I identify that I'm having a hard time, what do? I do a connection, I make a connection, I reach out to people. Even if I don't have to call and say, Jamie, my life sucks, I hate everybody. No, I can just call Jamie and say, hey, what did you do today? How was dance? She just told me about a dance class that she's taking. And I'm just like, that is so interesting. Because you know what, when you're in crisis, usually, and this is from Dr. Adrienne Hines, she's at the Center for PTSD, the VA National Center for PTSD. She's a research psychologist. When you're in crisis, you're literally in crisis for like a minute. So if you're in crisis and you can just connect with another human being, and it doesn't have to be about trauma. You can be like, hey Joe, how's your kids? Hey, how was your day? Does the VA still suck? Like, you have to ground yourself, and connecting with someone else is how you do that. And every time I tell my story, I save my own life. I do. Because I'm reminded of where I've come, how far I've come, right?
Yeah.
It's like my eyebrows.